Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 60 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. And welcome to another short special episode on living and parenting in this time of global pandemic. This is the second short episode. I hope you caught the first one. It was released a few days ago. My discussion with Marnie Williams-Balotis of Hummingbird in Canada about widowed parenting in this time and some of the issues that might come up, some of the things that might be creating increased anxiety for our kids or, new issues for kids that are already grieving. This episode today, focusing on a little different aspect of that, my discussion with Jana DeCristofaro of the Dougy Center, which is in Portland, Oregon. And we talked about creative ways to support one another at this time of social distancing. And the question that I teed up for her was really this. If we have grieving teens in our families, we might be thinking about, if they typically would be needing and looking for support from their peers. Do we need to set up some kind of limits to keep them away from their friends that might ordinarily provide that support? Or do we need to make exceptions that then might put the health of many people at risk? Or are there some other options? And so we really dug into what are some of those creative options and ideas that Jana shared with us for ways to continue to support one another in this time of social distancing. And the discussion started really about teens, but I think it's more broadly applicable in general to people who are dealing with grief at this time, and maybe some ways to adapt what we might ordinarily be doing and figure out some other ways to try to get support. As you might guess, some of them involve technology, but there are a lot of really creative options. So I hope you'll check it out. And I hope you enjoy this discussion with Jana DeCristofaro. My guest today is Jana DeCristofaro of the Dougy Center in Portland, Oregon. So Jana is the host of their podcast, Grief Out Loud, and she's also the Community Response Program Coordinator at the Dougy Center. So she runs groups for kids and teens and young adults who are grieving a death. So Jana, welcome to the show today. Welcome back to the show, I should say.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, and thanks for hopping on this call here to do this special short episode about widowed parenting during this time of global pandemic. And, I should say, as we're recording this, it's March 21st here. Things are changing daily and even hourly, so it feels somehow important to put a marker in time here that it's March 21st. And I should say, thank you for hopping back on here with me. As you know, we tried this yesterday, and I think everybody in the whole world is on Zoom, and things were very unstable and crashing, so we'll try this again here today.
Hopefully a few people are still sleeping, so they haven't quite gotten on their Wi-Fi yet.
Yes, hopefully so. Yeah. And for listeners, if we do crash, we will do our best to get Jana back, and we'll just go from there, and it'll all be good. So as you know, I'm doing a series of short episodes on different aspects of this. And as we were chatting before, I mean, none of us is really the expert on the whole big question of, what the heck do we do? But at least if we can talk about, one piece at a time here, I think we can, bring some ideas and tips and resources and whatnot to listeners. So the question that I wanted to tee up for you today, because you wrote a terrific piece, I forget what the publication was, but I'll link it in the show notes, but specifically about some creative ways to, the grieving teens can support each other, during a time when we're all supposed to be social distancing, because I think some of us might be thinking about, ordinarily, maybe our teens would be getting together with each other to support each other. Do we need to prohibit that? Do we need to allow that and maybe create risks? Or are there some other maybe creative options that can get support while still social distancing? So that's kind of the conversation I wanted to tee up today. Sound good?
That sounds great.
Cool. Okay. So let me ask first, though, I guess just broadly, why is it important that teens be able to have some kind of peer support at any time, including now?
Well, I think so many grieving teens say, at least to me in our grief support groups, that being with other teens who've had somebody in their life die is the only time they feel like they're with people who get it, and they're not having to explain themselves or justify themselves or alter their behavior or their reactions to the things that they're talking about in any way. So often teens will say, I don't want to be the downer in my group of friends if nobody else is dealing with grief. So that's a lot, and for a lot of teens, maybe they're in a formal support group where they're meeting with other kids who get it, or maybe they have a few people in their friend group who have had somebody die. And with so many peer support groups putting their groups on hold right now, people not being able to meet up in the natural ways that they did, not having that regularity and consistency of school, I can imagine for a lot of these teens feeling really disconnected. And so thinking about them, but I'm also thinking about parents and caregivers and what a hard space people are in with, as you mentioned, do I let my teen hang out with their friends and put them at risk, or do I not, and then risk them not having that social connection? So I just want to honor for a moment how tough that is to be making those calls every day, every moment, especially as you mentioned with things changing so quickly. I was thinking about, like, as a parent, there's these dangers for kids that are really visible and tangible. Like, we know, pull a kid's hand back from a burner, or hold onto a kid's hand before they cross the street. But in this situation, we only have what the news and agencies and organizations are telling us, but it's not very visible. So I can just imagine how hard that would be as a parent of, like, is this okay? Is this okay? And knowing that everyone's going to have to come to their own decisions about that. People are responding in this moment very differently. And that, to me, is a parallel with grief. We all express and experience our grief differently, and how people are responding right now. Some people are mobilizing and doing. And some people are feeling more paralyzed. And some people feel like, maybe I'm just going to go about my life the way it is because I can't take in any more information. And some people are going to stop everything, and everywhere along the medium of that. So I know I'm not answering your question, but I just really wanted to acknowledge, like, what a tough time it is. And I mean, I know for me personally, I'm like, is it safe to go to the grocery store? Should I do delivery? If I do delivery, do I have to disinfect everything that's coming in my house? If I go back to the office to get my office equipment, how many pairs of gloves am I going to have to go through? How many doors am I going to touch? So just thinking, like, our brains are being taken up with so many decisions and thoughts that we weren't thinking about a month ago. So long intro to say, parents and caregivers, just take a moment for yourselves and acknowledge all that you're going through. And you're probably not going to get this perfect or right, and give yourself a ton of grace. So there's that. And also going back to your question of, like, why is it important for teens to have that peer support? It's because they want to be with other people who get it. And like you said, we're looking at creative ways for teens to still have that connection. We talk about social distancing, but what we're really saying is physical distancing. So how do we keep ourselves physically apart while maintaining social connection? And, I know we're going to talk about some of those tangible ways to do that.
Well, that's such a good point. I want to just kind of reiterate that. I wish somebody had named it physical distancing from the beginning. We can just move forward and say physical distancing. Yeah, let's create our own hashtag or something. Because social distancing is Well, I mean, you just said it very well. We need to we need to not isolate ourselves. We need to still be social in ways that are safe. So virtual and distance and things like that are all good ways to maintain that, because we probably need social ties more than maybe ever now in this, and everything's so uncertain, and I was just talking to someone the other day who said, one of the hardest things is we don't know how long this is going on for. And if we had a date where at least you could count down or something, then there would be some amount of certainty, at least in a known end point.
Right. Which, again, is such a parallel to grief, right? Someone dies in our life. We want to know, when are we going to stop feeling the way we're feeling? What's the end point? What's the steps I'm going to take to, like, work through this and mitigate all these emotions that I'm having? And, like, I want to know what's happening at the other end. And it makes so much sense that we're feeling that. And so I would encourage folks who have experienced grief to, like, tap into, what's your knowledge? How did you navigate that uncertainty? How did you navigate this ongoing experience that feels really scary and uncertain? You may have more tools and skills than your non-grieving friends. And to remember that you have some confidence there of having weathered a similar type of situation, even though it's also very different.
Good point. Okay. Good point. Okay, so let's jump into then I think you have some creative suggestions for us. So, and maybe it's for teens, maybe it's for parents with their kids. I mean, I think a lot of people could apply these strategies in a lot of different, based on their own situations and whatnot. So let's just jump right into this. What kind of creative ideas do you have for us?
Well, I think about it in two perspectives. I think about it as a family who's grieving. So maybe the person that you're grieving that has already died, also forecasting potentially heartbreaking it is to think about of other people in our lives dying through this, and how are we going to gather without being maybe physically present with one another. So there's family grief and connection. And then there's ways for teens to stay connected, potentially with other grieving teens or with their friends, or needing to gather as a community if one of their friends or community members dies. So trying to keep my thoughts coordinated in those three areas. So maybe let's start with like within a family. And I imagine many of your listeners are folks who, maybe a parent or a caregiver has died. And as a family, you may already have rituals and routines around how you acknowledge, express, and process grief together and individually. And so say you're a family who was a part of a formal support group. Did your group meet every other Wednesday evening for an hour and a half? Maybe talk with your kids and say, hey, do we still want to gather every other Wednesday and kind of pretend like we're having grief support group time together? And maybe it becomes sharing time about the person who died, or looking at photos, or doing something the person who died really liked to do. So there may be a way to create that structure. Or if you've made connections with another grieving family in your grief support group, could you set up a video chat for that time, so you still feel like you're coming together? With knowing that many of the grief support programs across the country are working on a plan for virtual support. So I imagine that is coming, but in the meantime, how can you maintain that? So that's one option for within the family, continuing to do those things, and thinking about, like you said, we don't know how long this is going to last. So imagining families who are going to be coming up on anniversaries of when the person died, birthdays of the person who died, other milestone and significant days. And so keeping those on the radar, that we can still do something as a family, even if it's just taking a walk around our neighborhood 6 feet apart from everybody else. So, just allowing some time and space for that. So that's what I think about within the family. And then if we're thinking about, say there's a group of teens and someone in their life dies, and they don't have that opportunity to come together and gather and grieve, remember that person, that there's different ways, again, relying on technology. And so for parents and caregivers out there, I would say ask your teens what they're using, because they probably know a lot more than you do. I mean, I know they know more than I do about what's available. I only know Zoom. That's my one start, but I know there's other ways out there to be connecting. So working as a group of friends to gather, do we set up a nightly video chat where we all can come together and just check in and be like, how are people doing? What memories came up today? What stories were you thinking about? What were the times when you really, you found yourself reaching for your phone to text our friend and recognizing, I can't text them anymore. So video chatting that way. Make a collective playlist on whatever program people are using. Spotify, again, is the only one that I know about, but I know you can work together to make a playlist. You could make a playlist of favorite songs of the person who died, songs that remind you of them, songs that just help you in your grief in some way. And then if there's a chat feature or another time to gather, you could share stories about why you picked those specific songs. So music can be such a powerful place to connect with and express grief. And then along those lines of a collective project, more expressive project, I think about Google Photo, Shutterfly, Snapfish, whatever people are using to make virtual collective photo albums. So you could all get on together to the same photo album, share photos, and you could take it to the next step and create a book where you can write in captions about those photos and those stories, and then send those books to everybody in the community. So that would be another option.
I love that. And there's so many applications for that too, right? If a family's got a death anniversary coming up or something else that they want to mark and they can't gather with, extended family or something, maybe they create a project like that amongst the extended family to, put together a book about that parent who died or whatnot.
Yeah, right. Like jumping back to group A of our thoughts of like how to support within a family. Definitely. When you think about younger kids, they have a limited amount of memories and stories about their person who died, and they seem to really treasure and value hearing stories about that person from other people in their lives, other family members and friends. And so how powerful to be able to create a photo book like that with a story written in by, your dad's friend growing up, or your mom's college roommate or something like that. So I think that applies across all those categories we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Okay, great. So what else?
Well, this is one I was thinking about for a particular situation where a group of teens had a friend die. And I don't know, it just broke my heart thinking about how many more of those stories we may hear, whether it's that somebody dies of COVID-19 and we're not able to gather or say goodbye to them in person, or someone dies from something else, car crash, another type of illness, and we still can't come together. So again, just taking a pause to think about that, how much we're having to adapt and innovate to a situation that's already requiring us to adapt and innovate emotionally and socially. So with that, I don't know. I'm just having a moment of thinking like, I can't believe I'm even having to say this, but if we need to come up with some way to do a virtual DIY memorial service, we can get creative around that. You can schedule a time over video chat again, and people can come together virtually and do what they would have done if they had a chance to gather in person. Maybe they read a poem, or they write a letter to the person that they read out loud, or they gather up some flowers from their yard to show people on the video chat, or they light a candle, or they sing a song, or they perform a piece of music. So any of the things that people might have done, but just having to do that virtually and knowing that that's available, and it might feel weird and awkward, but it's okay to do something like that. So there's that one. That felt really heavy to talk about.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about something else that feels a little less heavy, which is thinking about how can we honor the person who died, whether it's, a family out there and dad died a year ago or 2 years ago, or it's a group of friends and someone just died recently. So doing that while also thinking, how can I support a local business in the fact that there's a lot of grief right now economically, and so many local businesses having to shutter their doors, temporarily, hopefully coming back online. And I've heard that one of the things we can do for folks is to be buying gift certificates to use at a future time. So, thinking about what was your friend's favorite place to go get sushi, or what was your mom's favorite place to get her hair cut, and getting a gift certificate and planning to use that in the future so we have something to look forward to. And it could also be, if it's a group of friends, they could plan a time together when they're going to go and use that gift certificate. So that's another more tangible thing that I've been thinking about.
I love that. And like you said, it has the added benefit of supporting that local business in this time when that is very, very critical as well.
Yeah. And then the last thing that comes to mind, and this might be less for actual grieving people and more for if anyone's listening to your podcast who is supporting grieving people in their life, and we may be a grieving person who's also supporting another grieving person in our life. I'm thinking about gifting people subscription services, right? Like, I've had Netflix forever, but I just signed up for Showtime because I'm spending a lot more time at home, and it's nice to have different opportunities. So it could be something like that. It could be, I did my first live stream yoga class this morning with my studio. So you could be gifting people a gift certificate to a gym that's doing virtual live stream classes, or a yoga studio, or even things like masterclass. I don't really know what that is, but I hear the advertisement all the time. There's a lot of online learning opportunities, Audible, just things to help people take care of themselves.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna pull out some of those, and of course, everything you mentioned, I'll put links in the show notes, but I'm trying to pull out some of these resources too and share them on Pinterest or on Instagram or whatnot, as spreading some of these ideas around. Audible is a great one because, you can get a month-to-month subscription, a year subscription, whatever. And then, you can get all these books and you don't have to go anywhere, touch anything, get any germs. It just comes right to your phone. So,
or even I mentioned Spotify earlier. If somebody were to gift me a membership to Spotify, so I can stop listening to the Tide commercial over and over again because I just have the free one.
Yeah,
that'd be great. So thinking about what are all the things that we pay for, where people are again experiencing economic strain, and I'm thinking about people who maybe a primary caregiver died, already facing economic uncertainty. Add in this on top of it, folks who have more marginalized identities already experiencing economic strain or lack of access to resources. And so how can we be creating that community care and supporting people in these really concrete ways? I thought of one last thing. Can I share?
Oh, yes, please do.
So it's going back to if you've got a teen in your life or a kid in your life who's grieving and they're disconnected from other grieving kids and teens, knowing how powerful that can be, that there are a few online resources for kids and teens. I think StoryCorps did a project called Road to Resilience with 6 different bereavement programs around the country. And so they created these conversations, kids and adults, or kids and kids talking to each other. And so StoryCorps' website, the Road to Resilience website, has some illustrated videos of kids talking about their experience of grief. The Dougy Center's website has a few of those clips on our SoundCloud account. So there's ways to hear the voices of other grieving kids and teens so that you can feel less alone in your experience. Our School and Community Toolkit website, we have a series of videos that were documentaries made by grieving teens talking about their person. There's like 35 of them. So again, another way that we can still connect and hear the voices of others or see the faces of others who are grieving.
Okay. Well, thank you for mentioning that. I had forgotten about that for the moment. And I interviewed StoryCorps a while back, so I'll share that link too, and this is reminding me, see, we should keep brainstorming all day here because StoryCorps has an app that anybody can put on their smartphone right now and record their own stories in their own homes with their own children, interviewing, kids can interview parents, parents can interview kids. I suppose you could figure out a way to, do it remotely with grandma. I don't know what, but this could be an interesting, people who are looking for activities to do with their kids. If we don't have time, a lot of the times to sit down and think about recording stories and sharing family stories, we could do it now. And StoryCorps has an app for that.
Yeah. And you can, if you have a video chat with grandma, say it's not, you don't have, maybe grandma can't figure out the app part yet, or maybe kid can't figure out the app part, but you can record your Zoom video chat. I don't know if you can record a Google Hangout or FaceTime. So there's another way to get those stories and catalog them and keep them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is terrific. Okay. Like I said, we probably could keep brainstorming all day long, but we'll save that for another day here. So let me ask you here just before we wind up, do you guys have anything on your website that people should know about right now?
Yeah, so we just released a tip sheet yesterday. It's called When Your World is Already Upside Down, Supporting Grieving Kids and Teens in the COVID-19 Global Health Crisis. So there's going to be some information just about what we're hearing from other families and what they're experiencing, and then some really concrete tips and suggestions for supporting kids in their grief and just any emotions that are coming up through this time. So that's a tip sheet that just went out. It's on our website. And we also just released an episode of Grief Out Loud, talking with a mom whose husband died, and she has a tween, and just talking about what's coming up in her grief during this time and how she and her daughter are coping. So those 2 things just came out. And then I would say stay tuned to our website and our social media channels, because we have a few other tip sheets we're working on. And I know there'll be some more podcast episodes coming out as well.
Okay, terrific. Well, I'll be sure to link to those then here as well. And actually on the new Pinterest board I created last night, which is, I think I called it Coronavirus Pandemic Resources. I'll make sure to link to your tip sheet there as well.
Great.
Because I think that'll be a good one to help get the word out about. Okay, super. So my guest today is Jana DeCristofaro of the Dougy Center and host of their podcast, Grief Out Loud. So Jana, where can listeners find Dougy Center and your website and your podcast?
Our main website is dougy.org. dougy.org. And then the page I mentioned that has videos and downloadable activities as well for kids and teens is our school and community toolkit. And that website's a little longer. It's tdcschooltoolkit.org. And then you just click on the For Kids and Teens page, and there's activities they can do, writing prompts, and videos and audio clips they can listen to. They can also email us at help@dougy.org and can listen to our podcast on our website or anywhere else that people are listening to podcasts.
Okay, terrific. Well, Jana, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for doing this work.
I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Jana DeCristofaro as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 60. And I hope this special short edition related to the pandemic has been helpful. If you're looking for other content that is more like regular programming, not related to the pandemic, look for a brand new episode this Wednesday, my interview with Lindsay Joy Taylor. A terrific discussion, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And stay tuned, because I'll be sharing more short episodes related to specifically this pandemic time, probably every few days. So keep an eye on that. And do follow me on Instagram and Pinterest at LiskJenny, on both of those, where I'll be sharing links and ideas, resources, and so forth. So hang in there. Hope you're doing okay. Do write to me and let me know if there's some topics that you think will be helpful for me to cover. All right. Thank you for listening, and keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.